Hello aspiring developers, welcome to today's session. Today we are going to learn about DOM, the document object model in JavaScript. So let's dive right in. Since you're already aware that the entry point of our website is the HTML, there we pass the head and that is what will be given as an example, our title. Then we have the body where all the elements will be passed down, like let's say the LI and the P as it's seen in our thumbnail. So that is what we are going to learn about, how to manipulate these HTML elements using JavaScript. So let's head over to our Visual Studio Code and see all these in action. So now I have my index.html file. I'll just use the short command to generate the complete structure of HTML. Here I'll just say document title. I can create a h1 tag. You know that it's important to have h1 tags within your body, and that is just describing what the general description of that page. So you can see this learning JavaScript. Also we can add things like the h2 element, but you can have it inside a div. So let's just say, or rather you can have a nav element. Here you can say L1 and say this is the home page. You can also have a next L1 and you can call it the about page. They don't have any links. We don't have hrefs for them. And you can also have a div here, and in the div you can just pass in a h2 to say learning DOM, and below it you can say you can have a p tag there saying JavaScript is powerful, JavaScript is fun and powerful. Yeah, so these are simple HTML structure. If you don't have the go live button down here, then it means you don't have the necessary extension. Just tap on Ctrl+Shift+X, then it will open for you the Visual Studio Code extensions, and you'll be able to download a 5 server or a live server extension. So when I run it, you see that it's up my browser on localhost 5500 as the port. So if I control click this, my browser is going to be opened, and let's just see how it looks like. Yeah, so here is our browser. Let me just zoom in a bit. 175 is okay. So you see that we have our heading, learning JavaScript, our nav li elements. We also have our h2 and our p tag. So the document title that we passed in the head is also here as document title. But now the document itself, this is the document, this white rectangle that you're seeing, that's what we call the document. It's an object in JavaScript, and that document object is what we use to manipulate elements, HTML elements. So back to our Visual Studio Code, we're going to understand how all this works. Yeah, so we can understand that this is our website, or rather our single page website that we've just created. We have seen where the head is and the entry point of the website being the body. So now we have to understand that in HTML, these elements are considered as objects when you try accessing them using JavaScript. So this h1 is an object, nav is an object, li is an object, and you can see that we have several nesting. So here we see that h1 is nested in the body element, li is nested in the nav element, and nav is also nested in the body element. So there's that tree where we have parents and children. So this upper level elements are called the parents. The ones that are inside it or nested within it, we are called the child elements. So we are going to use the nodes. The nodes is just the point where body and h1 connect. So that is the node that you're going to use to access and manipulate this element. So for now, we've talked about manipulating them so much. Let's dive right in and see using the script tag. We're going to write our JavaScript code within the HTML body. You can always have it outside. You already know about that. So there is this predefined document object in JavaScript. This document is an object. It is already predefined in JavaScript. We learned about predefined objects, a few of them being the math object. We also learned about which other object? The array object. Yeah, so those are predefined objects in JavaScript. And since they are objects, you understand that objects have properties and methods. So this document also this document object is the root object, or rather the owner of all the HTML elements that we have or that can be accessed on the browser. So the document, if you want to access any objects in HTML, you'll always start with accessing the document object. So an example is if you want to access this body document, body object, you'll first start with the document object, and then you access it. You access the body as a child of this document object, and then now here is where you use the dot notation to pass in the property or method that you want. So for now, we can pass in the property inner HTML. This inner HTML property belongs to the document object, and it is used to edit values that are within the HTML of the specified tag. In this case, we have body as the specified property of that document object. And when you say inner HTML equals my body placeholder, and just say my body value. So now this document object takes this property body, which takes the property inner HTML and changes the inner HTML. This is the inner HTML of the body, and it changes the whole of this to my body value. So now if we open our browser, we're going to see, let's just open the browser. Yeah, you're going to see my body value. Let me just, you're going to see my body value. So that is what is there in our browser. So you remember that this changed, and we can open here the console, just inspect. Yeah, so that you can open the console. Just tap on console. First, most of you will have it at the top as a vertical tab, but as a horizontal tab, but mine is as a vertical tab. So just choose the console so that you can see your console. So, or rather, you can go to elements, and then you type on body, and in body you can tap on can just tap on this body to expand it. Yeah, okay, this is the head, so we can expand the body. You see that it only has my body value as whatever is being passed, but all of that has been edited using JavaScript, as we already seen earlier. So right now, again, if you just say document, just here on the console, you say document dot body dot inner. See, if you say dot document, it highlights the whole of this white rectangle. Then when you say dot body, it now highlights the body, or rather the HTML body that you are having. Then now when you say dot inner HTML, this is now highlighting the value of that body. And when you equate it to now, or rather reassign a different value to it, let's say you assign the value my new body value. Yeah, so when you assign this my new body value and hit on enter, you see that the whole value changes from my body value to my new body value. So that is how strong the document dot body is, because body is the parent of all the other elements within, all the other objects within the body element. Yeah, so that's it on the DOM. And now we can learn about selecting elements in JavaScript using the document object. So let's head back to Visual Studio Code and see how that can be done. So I'm going to start by commenting out that document.body. Then I'm just going to write whatever we are learning today here as a comment. We are learning about, excuse me, selecting elements. There are several ways of selecting elements, but I'm going to take you through the basic three. So here we are going to select this H1 element, the nav element, the li element. I believe just the three of them will be enough. So first we can give this H1 an ID and say ID header text, sorry, yeah. Then we can give this nav a class, can say class attribute, and the class attribute we can give, we can say my nav, yeah. Then yeah, we can just use the ID and the class, because I'm only showing you three ways of selecting elements as at now first. So we are going to look at selecting elements using the using the ID get element by ID method of the object of the document object. So I hope you can see my script here. Just reduce it a bit. Yeah, so now I'm going to declare a variable let h1, or simply you can just say document dot, if you remember I said dot, whatever you want to select. So here we are calling the get element by ID method of the document object, and this method takes in a string. So the string should be the element ID. You can see it from my hovered Visual Studio Code explanation. So we are going to pass the ID. In our case, the ID here is header text. So we pass header text there. But now you're going to question yourself. Yes, you have selected this, but where have you stored it? So you can just declare a variable. So let's say let, you can use let h1 equals document.get element by ID header text. So now we have the whole of this h1 stored in a h1, or rather we can say variable 1, variable h1. That can make more sense. Yeah, so we have all this h1 element, all of it has been selected using the the document.get element by ID selector, and now we have it, the value of that stored is in a variable named variable h1. You can always log this to the console, but first let us just look at it from our website. So let's fire up our website once again. Since we commented out the document.body, you now realize that all our HTML code is back. You remember that it was lost because we were using the .inner HTML to modify it. So now you can say console.log, just console.log, and then how is that called? We call it header. We call it variable h1. Yeah, so if you hit on enter, you notice that you see h1, the whole of h1 has been selected, and we are talking about selecting elements. So you see that the whole of h1 has been selected. When you hover here, you see that that is what has been selected. So that is the get element by ID selector. Let us learn the second one, which is the get element by class name. So back to our Visual Studio Code. We can have a console log variable here. So just say variable h1. Sorry, variable h1. So now we are going to learn about the second way of selecting elements, and now we are going to learn about the document.get element by IDs. We have learned by ID. Now let's get element by the class, the name of the class. So here you can say let nav, or rather variable nav, variable nav equals document dot get element by class name. And here you see that when you're using the ID, it only selects one element, so it is get element by ID. But when you use the class name, it selects several elements, or rather an array of elements. So here you see we are using get elements by class name. This also takes string as a parameter, and this string should be the class name that you've passed to your element. So here I've passed the class name my nav. So I'll just pass in my nav. Now you notice that we are accessing this nav element using the the get element by class name method of the document object. So we can just print this, or you can also log this to the console and just say console.log, and we log the variable nav. Now that we have this ready, we have used console.log. We are going to look at that on the browser, but because it is almost similar to the tag name, let me also write the variable. Which tag are we selecting? We're going to select the li tag now. So variable li. Remember, variable name, you can give it any name. I'm just using a variable li so that it can be descriptive. Get element by tag name, and here we're going to pass the tag name. This also takes a string. So by tag name also takes a string as the parameter, and here the tag that we want to access is the li. Yeah, so we can log this to the console. Just log to the console the variable li. Yeah. Now let's head over to our browser and see selecting by tag by class name and selecting by tag name. So remember, this is what we call a tag. So this is the list tag or the li tag. So that is the tag name that we are using to select, and here we are using the class name. So let's head over to our browser and see that in action. Oh, but first we said that this one takes a string as the parameter. So this li should be a string. Yeah, sorry about that. So let's now head over to our browser and do whatever we call selecting of items. Yeah, so now that we have our browser open, you see that this one we are selecting by class name, this one we are selecting by tag name. So by class name, you see that it outputs 0, and this 0 is I said it prints out as an array. So this array nav is an array, and it has 2 objects in it. And when you just look down at this explanation of all this, you notice that there are all these classes here that you can, properties that you can explore, and we'll explore a few when we start manipulating elements of the DOM elements. So here we have attributes, and almost each and every one of them has some other child nodes. So this li, this was the nav element. It had the li. You can just look at it again. Our nav element. Our nav element here, it had two li's as its child elements. So back to the console, you're going to see that the child nodes. Here we have the child nodes as a text. The child element count is 2. So this 2 stands for the 2 list elements. But the nodes that we have are going to be 5, because first we have nav, and then the li element, and then the home, which is the text of the li element, and then we have the li element for about, and then the text that says about. So when you hover on each and every one of these, you see that they're being highlighted on our browser. So those are the child nodes. So the children is just the child elements, the elements of the child. So that is what we call the children. So we have only 2 children. That is 2 li elements for the children. Class list, we only have 1 class. We have only passed my nav as the only class of the nav element. So we'll only see, but as an array, my nav. So that is the class list. Data set, this you'll see when you deal with data, and there is a data attribute. So the first child of the nav element was the text. You remember we said the first one was the text, then the li. So the last one is also the text. So last child here is also text. Last element will be the li, and the first element will also be li. But if you edit this, maybe you say, let's edit as HTML, and maybe we pass in here an anchor tag. Maybe in the anchor tag you say, you pass in some value like first child, first element, not child, first element. So now if you go back to the console, you can notice that where is it? Have we passed that? Okay, we haven't passed it there. Okay, I don't know if this can allow us to save this. So yeah, there we have added the first. We have added a new element, which is the a tag. So we can go to our console, and in the nav, you are going to see that it still has a length of 1, because we only have one nav, my nav class. Then inside that my nav class, we have the children. The children have now increased. Where are the children? Here they are. Okay, this cannot access the last one that we added. So unless we add it from our Visual Studio Code, we cannot access it via the cannot add it via the console and access it. Yeah, so that's it for the class name. For the tag name, you see that it also outputs an array of objects. We have the first, is this the tag name? Yeah, the tag name. We have the first object here as li, the li tag. We have the second li tag, and there we also have its properties. So we said you have to think of every element as an object, and you remember we used the .length property for the objects to output the length of the objects that you are accessing. So when we say get element by tag name li, we are going to access, we have a total of 2 li elements. So that's it for selecting elements using the .get element by id